In the last two episodes of the small print column, I have been interviewing, um, VCs and investors. The idea was to understand as to what is happening on the VC space, also what are various India UK funds doing and what are their intentions going forward. Currently, if you look at the Indian startup investment scenario, the startup deals in India is just about picking up the pace. Investors are looking to hunt for post-pandemic investments. Uh, at this point, if you look at it, given the market growth of India in terms of the consumption, in terms of the large middle class with access to cheap smartphones, internet, global investors are looking forward to India as an investment destination. So, how does this look? How does this pan out? At this point, if you look at it, there are a lot of investors globally who are set to take steps and take up investment positions in Indian startups, mainly tech startups, of course. This is also to do that there is a surge in investment happening, not just during the pandemic, but also post-pandemic. At this point, if you look at it, we've already had a record about $30 billion via public and private equity deals this year already. And bankers and analysts are very upbeat about the whole situation on the startup investment scenario currently. In addition to this, the regulatory clampdown by China on its technology firms is also causing some bit of uh, change in the patterns of investments by foreign investors. And hence they're turning to India, which is the most promising destination after China at this point. If you look at the fundraising in the Indian startup ecosystem in the last few months and typically during the current year, there has been a fundraising boom in India by companies ranging from e-commerce platforms to food delivery apps to education startups. Each of these have been doing really well, picking up good investments from investors, both domestic and international, and that's where they are flourishing quite well. If you talk about IPOs, for example, there have been quite a few successful IPOs by Indian startups in the recent months. One of the major IPOs recently was of Zomato, which did really well, and it was oversubscribed uh, during this pandemic period or the post-pandemic period, if we may call them. As compared to that, if you look at what happened to Deliveroo in the UK, it was a different scenario. The valuations didn't go right. The listing price of Deliveroo was not exactly as planned by the investors as well as the founders. So there is a stark difference in what's happening in the IPO market as well, whereas India is concerned as compared to the Western world as well. The other examples of good funding that has happened either pre-IPO round or post-IPO round or during the IPO as well. For example, this year uh, there have been quite a few interesting pre-IPO funding rounds of about $22 billion that have been raised, and this was as per a report by PitchBook, putting India on track of exceeding the 2020 numbers of a record $37 billion that were raised. Uh, of the amount raised in 2021, foreign investors have invested about 13.21 billion in the first half of this year, and the most ever as compared to the 4.99 billion in the same period during the last year. And this is again by a data by, by one of the agencies again. In the same way, if you look at, as I said, IPOs, there have been about 43 IPOs till date in the current year, and this has been the busiest period for the Indian stock markets as well as for the startups in terms of the IPOs. Again, there was a record $5.4 billion that were raised by these 43 IPOs, which is quite a large, huge jump as compared to last year, where there was about 1.24 billion that was raised through the IPOs in the market. And there have been a lot of big ticket offerings in the pipeline as well. If you look at it, in the current year itself, which includes about up to a 2.2 billion float by the Indian digital firm or the payment platform Paytm, which counts China's fintech giant Ant Group and Japan's SoftBank amongst its backers as well. So this is a change that we are seeing in the market in terms of the investments happening in some of the startups. I did mention about Zomato and Zomato's IPO issue, which was a successful or a blockbuster, if I have to use a Bollywood term, which did its debut last month or in the middle of July. The stock did surge nearly 66% after the company raised 1.3 billion in an IPO. This does not mean that the rivals are not doing well. If you look at it, that their rival Swiggy this month completed 1.3 billion raise, um, which attracted SoftBank's Vision Fund 2 and technology investors Chorus. So there is quite a bit of action happening in that space, and I think it is just heating up. It will go further, and you will see more of these kind of investments happening in the segment as well. Going forward, we would also see quite a few large investors coming and looking at the Indian market. There was a Bank of America report which said that the Australian and Indian startups are doing really well and are positioned to benefit from a weakening China tech sector after Beijing's changes in regulations. And this is a positive news for Indian startups as well as the investment scenario of the Indian startups is concerned. We've also seen some traction in impact investments as well, and this has been quite interesting change in the scenario as well. There was some news around Willgrow and some of the other funds that are involved in impact investments. So these are quite positive news that we are getting from the Indian market, and I'm sure that with the rest of the year, you would see more action. We've already seen large number of unicorns or the highest number of unicorns coming out of the country in this one single year. And with these positive sentiments, irrespective of what scars the pandemic would have left behind, I'm sure in the coming months, we would have more positive news coming out of the Indian startup ecosystem, and we would see more investments happening in the Indian startup as well. Uh, I would also want to discuss a bit about some of the regulatory aspects where startups are concerned. If you look at a key concern that Indian startups or startups world over have about India is about the intellectual property protections. And I'm going to come up with a case study of an interesting Indian startup which did defend its IP against established corporates. And these are the kind of things that are positive news, not just on the funding side, but also on the regulatory side, as well as on the ecosystem side, that are going to make India blossom or go forward as favorable startup ecosystem.